My guest today was once a conservative Christian evangelical leader, a respected businessman, and a married father of 6, while living deep in the closet. Over the years, he survived a bankruptcy, a messy divorce, and a massive heart attack before coming out publicly as a gay man. Joining me from his home in Virginia Beach, Virginia, David Nygaard. Well, David, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me.
Glad you're here today. Looking at your background, your story reads like a soap opera comes to mind, and I want to get to all the twists and turns. But first, I want to start with when you first knew you were gay. How old were you? How did you know?
Well, I think most of us have a similar story. We grew up in an age where it was both illegal and a mental illness to be gay. So I think we tended to kind of run away from those feelings. But I remember always being, and it wasn't necessarily sexually attracted, but I think I always had kind of an affinity or an attraction to guys really when I was very young, probably 6, 7, 8. And so I think, but of course you don't have a word for it and you don't really know what that is. And so I think we all have that. And then as we get older, and mature, we begin to get more of an understanding of what that is, but we still often don't have the language to put with it, I think.
How did you recognize that attraction at that early age?
Gosh, I don't know. I guess I just remember watching TV shows and thinking that would be cool to be in that TV show, whether it was Courtship of Eddie's Father or I remember Man from U.N.C.L.E. Or some of those types of shows, and you think, oh, that'd be kind of cool to be in that kind of environment as a kid, and I think you kind of have that when you're younger, but you don't really understand it, and then as you get older, when you get into the puberty, you begin to recognize, oh, maybe I'm being turned on by this. Maybe I'm attracted to this, to guys. And so I think that's when the kind of the awakening comes in. And in our generation, we didn't really have words for a lot of it other than just a great deal of negative connotation.
Did it change your behavior, how you acted as a youth?
I think for me, I tended to kind of run away from it, and just kind of suppress it and ignore it. So no, it didn't really change my behavior. For instance, I would go out on dates with girls in high school, and so I hung around my guy friends. We had a good time, and so it didn't really change my behavior so much. But it was just something that I was pretty normal teenager, I think.
I know for me, I put on what I'd say is a 3-foot mask that developed over time and just kept building up layers, to where once I came out, I realized that I built that protective layer out there to keep myself small in some ways and not known, but I didn't know what known from.
Right, right. I think that's true too. And I would say that you do wear the mask, but I didn't really feel at the time, looking back, I don't think I felt like I was wearing a mask. I felt like I was just trying to figure out who I was in the context of friends and family.
Yeah. I didn't know my mask was there until later on is when it came about.
Yeah,
so.
I would say the same thing.
So as I understand, you grew up in a deeply religious church environment. How did that affect your attitudes about being gay?
So the truth is that I was not raised in the evangelical community. I was not raised in a deeply religious family. I turned to my faith. I turned to evangelical Christianity as a way to, I think, escape the depression, B, the needing that sense of belonging. And so my parents were not evangelicals growing up. My dad was a Navy captain, and they were traditional Christians, but they were not evangelical. They were not a part of the evangelical movement. I got connected to an organization called Campus Crusade when I was in high school, and got involved in the evangelical community through that organization.
How did you think that would round you out, or what were you seeking when you went after that?
I think on the one hand, you feel like, okay, I'm going to pray the gay away, and on the other hand, it provides a community of people that you're now a part of, even though it's very anti-homosexual, it's very accepting, and was just kind of a great community to be a part of at that time in my life. Great, establishing great male friendships, if that makes sense. And so I think this idea of being gay, sometimes we don't have quality male friends when we're kind of quote unquote hiding. And I guess in that context, it probably gave me the opportunity to have good quality male friendships that were safe.
Okay, all right. So then how did you meet your wife, and then what was your marriage like?
Well, we were actually very happily married. I met on a blind date. I was working as a youth director at my church, and she was a youth director at her church up in Delaware. And her cousins were good friends of mine, and they introduced me to her. We met on a blind date. We started dating. We went out. We went out on a couple dates, and then we just continued to keep dating. And within about a month and a half, 2 months, I guess about 2 months, we were engaged, and we were married 6 months to the day that we met. And I was about 28 years old, so I had been, I had not really had a serious girlfriend or dating relationship until that point. But in those days, within the evangelical community, you tend to not have those, relationships, dating relationships, because we're all being spiritually holy, right? If that makes sense. And so within that community, I fit in really well because I hadn't dated. I was a virgin when I got married at 28, we had many great years together in our marriage. So,
did you feel that was the way you had to be to live your life, or that you wanted to be?
Well, I think it was both. I felt like I had to be that, and I of course I wanted to be that, because I think in those days, again, we are trying to change that orientation, which is not very, we're never very successful, right, at that. And so I tried to, and I actually did find a lot of happiness there, a lot of I think I call them pockets of happiness that we can live in. And so I found a lot of great pockets of happiness, being a husband, having kids, raising those kids, and for many years we had a really great relationship. Was I still attracted to guys? Certainly I could be. And I think again, you just suppress it or you repress it, and then you kind of fall back in line into that mold. So many of us kind of fill the mold that we're poured into, right? And so I feel like I did that at times, and so I would go back into that mold.
Today I'm recommending a book that could be a game changer for anyone navigating a mixed orientation marriage, where one spouse is straight and one is not. It's called Is My Husband Gay, Straight or Bi by Joe Court. While the book is written for women, I highly encourage both partners, especially the husband, to read it. It's not just about finding answers, but about opening a dialogue that often feels too difficult to start. For the husband, it offers a way to better understand his own feelings and sexuality without shame or judgment. It's an invitation for both partners to step into vulnerability, explore the truth together, and hopefully find a path forward, whatever that may look like. The book can help create a safe space for honesty, which is essential to any healthy relationship. Again, the book is My Husband Gay, Straight or Bi by Joe Court. Now let's return to today's guest, David Nygaard. Staying in that mold and repressing and depressing, did that
Yep.
result as part of your divorce then?
It was more to do with my business than really anything else. I don't think it had sexuality had really very little to do with the failure of my marriage. It was really related more to business, more to family pressures that we had with kids. Now, what that did for me was it gave me kind of a chance to restart, and kind of a do-over. In my case, so we go through this divorce, and it was very messy. And again, many in our community have dealt with this, but it was very messy. But I found myself kind of out of obligation dating women. And then it kind of dawned on me at one point, I was like, why am I doing this? Why am I going back into the same cycle when after all these years, I like guys. And so and part of this was also just my experience within the church, because as a part of the divorce that we went through, our church was very involved in it. And I thought, all of a sudden I became what I would call a second-class Christian within my church. And I thought, why am I living my life for, according to other people's expectations, when they're never going to ultimately accept the fact that I'm divorced to begin with? And so I thought, why am I living in this same cycle? So I gave myself permission to start dating guys, and I gave myself permission to kind of explore that aspect of life. And I finally felt authentic and where I had true connection. I guess I would say a deeper connection. And so that's kind of where I kind of landed.
So that deeper connection is not something you'd felt before when you were...
I felt a deep connection, but it wasn't quite like falling in love with a guy, if that makes sense. I found myself finally understanding the 1980s love songs. It's like does that make sense?
It does. Yeah.
You sit down and you go, oh, I kind of know what that means. And so I had experienced a deep love, but I guess it may not have been as passionate a love as maybe I could have had, that I've realized since, if that makes sense.
So when you gave yourself permission to go this different path, was that the first time that you actually had experience with another man?
Yeah. I was on, I think it was Match.com, and I changed from seeking women to seeking men, and started there. And
so your face lit up a lot. You changed there. What's that feel like? What was the feeling at that time?
It was the feeling of no longer living by everybody else's rules, but having the freedom to make my own rules.
And how did that change your perspective on going forward in your life as you start this new chapter?
Well, as I start the new chapter, I was like, I'm going to do things differently this time around that I hadn't done before. And so, because, we often don't have the opportunity to have a second start in life. And I had a wonderful opportunity to start all over again from scratch. And so I did. I took it. I think a lot of people can look at their circumstances and just kind of be, woe is me. But I think we have to look at the bright side of these opportunities too. And so you have to look for the good, I think, in everything.
So for the good and that bright side, as you said it, the ultimate bright side to me would be falling in love. Did you have that experience of falling in love on this new path?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I found, I had fallen in love with my first boyfriend after being single. I fell in love. And now, I think a lot of times in our community, again, and coming out late, we have to learn a lot of things from scratch. And so I realized I was kind of falling into the same traps in terms of emotional manipulation and control with my first boyfriend. But it also was a brand new experience for me. So that first relationship was probably about 18 months. And then after that, I was single again, and really enjoyed the opportunity to go out and meet a lot of different people and date and hear stories and just genuinely connect with other guys that are gay, that are going through similar circumstances. Some of them are older, some of them are younger. I tended to drift towards more younger guys, and I don't know if that's because just of my life experience that I kind of stopped growing at a certain point. But I just genuinely enjoyed those dating relationships where I could connect with guys, hear their stories, and then talk about things and
go. Always good questions on. So I'm going to ask you how you did to get questions from other guys to say, how do you meet somebody? Here I am. I've come out. I'm 50, 60, whatever. There's all these applications and there's bars.
Sure.
What did you find that works for you that was effective?
Well, I would say that when I was first starting out, I had I had really quality conversations on some of the old apps that people like poo-poo, like Grindr and Scruff and some of the others, and Tinder, I guess. And so I met a lot of people through those, but I was genuinely just trying to meet people and understand the stories, and I was pretty open about my own story, and so I had a lot of good quality cups of coffee or grab a beer, and I had those. Now when I met, but I think the other thing is that if you're looking to meet all the time, you often won't find it. I think when you find yourself at a point where you're content with your circumstances where you are, that's usually when that person will show up in your life. It's almost like drawing that same energy that you're giving off, and so that I would say that for me, my successful relationship was the most successful one is when I wasn't looking for it. It just kind of showed up.
I like to tell people you have to date yourself first.
Yeah, I agree.
And really understand yourself first. Be comfortable with yourself, where you are, figure out what you're looking for, and then try to date others. If you do it the other way around, the vibes you're sending out is not necessarily the right.
Yeah, and I think so much of the dating and what I enjoyed in dating is getting to connect with another guy and hearing their story, gaining their perspective, whether I was going to date them or not, but it was having a relationship with them that wasn't fundamentally about a dating relationship or about sex or about anything other than just, hey, we're just getting together, we're talking, and we're having that time of connection.
Yeah.
The
across
ulterior,
the table.
But so many of our relationships, I think, in the gay community have ulterior motives, and there's just a lot of kind of underground things that are trying to move, and I think you just have to get to the point where you're like, I really enjoy people, and I want to get to know other people without any other, there doesn't have to be anything.
Yeah, set your parameters and stick to it and honor yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
What's best for you?
Exactly. Yep.
So now let's jump to another major piece to your life, as I understand it. 2016, I think you called it a widowmaker heart attack.
Yes.
How did that change you as well? Because you've now got the big change of now I'm gay, and now you got the heart attack.
Yeah. So I had only been gay for about a year before that. So 2016, I was playing pickleball with a friend, and a straight friend. And I was a little winded, and I, what do you do when you're winded? You just finish playing pickleball. I said, let's get a beer, right? And so I'm not feeling great, but I'm like, let's get a beer. So we drove to the place, and I'm feeling my jaw hurt. I'm going, anyway, and I we get to the bar and a restaurant, and he says, well, don't talk yourself into a heart attack. I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. So I said, well, let's not go in yet. Let me just sit outside and see how I can feel, a little bit. And he said, okay. Then I said, I really feel sick to my stomach. And he said, well, let me drive you to the hospital. I said, no, just call an ambulance. I don't want to throw up in your car, which is a good thing because he called the EMTs, and they came and picked me up, and I coded in the ambulance and didn't realize it. And passed out and woke up with a guy doing compressions, and still didn't realize that I had a heart attack at this point, right? I didn't realize what was going on. And, but I had 100% blockage of my LAD, which is called the widowmaker. And they tell me about 25% of people survive that. So.
Well, I'm glad you're here today. Now that you're
nice to be here.
Just healthy and animated, living this new path.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It would have been kind of sad if I had ended in 16 without, but no, I've had some great years since then too. Probably my best years,
So what did it change? It's the best years. What changed to make it the best years after that?
I think for me, it was just learning to live authentically as myself, for myself to not live by other people's rules and rules to make us happy. And so I found myself deciding that I was going to kind of rip. In my case, I wanted to rip the Band-Aid off. One of the things for me was, so many people knew me through my business, and a lot of people knew me. And so when I would go out to dinner, I would go out to dinner, and people that I would casually see would, would stop at a table and say, "Hey, how are you doing? Blah blah blah. How's your wife doing here with the kids?" And that's always a difficult conversation to have as you're walking to your table. And I happened to be with my first boyfriend, who would get livid if I didn't stop, have a whole coming out story for this guy. Right? And it was just, but you don't do that in polite company. You don't walk to the table and have this big bombshell. "Oh yeah, Gina and I are divorced, and this is my new boyfriend, and things are great." It's like you don't have that conversation when you're walking to your table at a high-end restaurant. You just don't. Mm-hmm. And so I determined that I wasn't going to have those conversations anymore, and that I would just rip the Band-Aid off and go and do the newspaper article. That's kind of what I ended up deciding to do.
As a life coach, I'm committed to help you discover the passions in your life and help you map a course to achieve the things you really want. Together, we will unwind those persistent self-doubts that are holding you back. You'll begin to see your passions more clearly and set achievable goals. Throughout your journey, I'll be there to challenge and encourage you in moving forward to discover your authentic self. For more information about my personal life coaching services, or to arrange a complimentary consultation, visit davidcottoncoaching.com.
You're listening to Out Late with David.
I had also had kind of a nightmare, because I was this evangelical Christian, conservative Republican, and active politically in the Republican circles. So I was the second district elector for John McCain, and it was at the 2008 and 2012 Republican conventions. And so I was involved politically, and I had this nightmare one morning. My dream was that I was running for Congress as an openly gay conservative Democrat. And I was just terrified of that, because I was still kind of closeted. And then I began to realize that if I ever did want to run for Congress, then I would have to run as a conservative, openly gay Democrat, because you couldn't do that in the Republican Party. And so having had that nightmare became my dream, and I ended up actually doing just that. Was running for for Congress as a openly gay Democrat. I joke to people. I say I changed teams. And I have changed teams. I've changed teams of several different ways. But I changed the parties, and I realized that, well, if I'm going to become a Democrat, get involved, I've got to play by their rules. And so I accepted their ruling that they didn't want me on the ballot, and I decided, okay, I'm going to run for city council, and I did, and I ran, and I won, and I was the first openly gay city council member for Virginia Beach history. So. I didn't serve the full term because I ended up it just became too much with family and it just got really messy. I just decided to go ahead and go off council and at the time I was in a new relationship and in hindsight, I'm kind of glad that I gave up the seat on city council, because it really allowed me to have a new relationship.
So let's jump quickly back to the kids.
Yes.
Talked about the heart attack and your realization. When did you come out to your children that dad is, as you said, switched teams and is gay?
Yeah. So I think my kids might have started to suspect it, because I had had a gay roommate who was not a partner of mine, but he was another single dad who was a good friend, became a good friend of mine, and in many ways a mentor. And he was gay. And so I think that they may have suspected as a result of that relationship. And then when I started dating my first boyfriend, I think that's kind of when I finally, expressed to them, hey, this is kind of what's going on.
And how do they react to that when you told them?
They were pretty good. I mean, they didn't react badly. They just kind of took it in stride. I think they had some questions, and so it helped them to process kind of how things were going. in my life anyway. And so I think it answered some questions for them.
Did you ever have to sit down with your ex-wife to tell her that you were gay?
No, I found that it was best to not have any contact. The relationship with my ex-wife was so toxic that it really doesn't lend itself to any communication. And my kids really have slowly been coming back to me, but I don't have any contact with my ex-wife at this point, and have no desire to. That's in the past, and she's not my friend. So many are friends with their ex-wives, and that's great. But in my case, she is not my friend. And it just was a very, very toxic relationship, and particularly the way it was divorced. So,
yeah, I've heard the story from many where that, and you just have to be patient. It may change in the future, or it may not.
I doubt it. Yeah, and I'm perfectly fine if it doesn't. I'm done.
Good approach. So you've been through all these changes in your life. You had a major health thing. Your business structure changed with the bankruptcy and the recasting your future.
Yep.
Now you're, I'm guessing, close to 60 or so.
Yeah, I just turned 60.
Happy birthday.
Yeah.
So what's your life like now?
I'm in an age gap relationship, and we started back in 2018, and we have a great relationship. Like many age gap relationships, we went from living in the same town, but because of divergent careers, we ended up in a long distance relationship, and we've just been committed to making that work.
So if I may ask, you mentioned age gap and younger.
Yep.
May I ask how much younger?
So we have a 27-year age gap, and which is the biggest age gap I've had. Most of the guys I've dated have been within 20 years, but this is the biggest age gap I've had. And I'd say it's the most unorthodox relationship, but it's also the most healthy relationship that I've had. And we have the best communication. We have the best connection. We are on the same page. I tend to be, as an entrepreneur, open to change and new things. And my partner is more of an old soul. And so we work out really well, Yeah.
I've seen another age gap. It's kind of like each partner brings something the other doesn't have.
Exactly.
One is the youth and some maybe excitement and things that the older hasn't. And then the older has the wisdom and experience. And together they have this interesting mesh of how we work as a couple.
Yeah, exactly. And it's great to be part of a couple, but to still be a whole person. So often I think you end up as a couple and you're still just half a person. And I felt like that in my marriage, that we were maybe, that I wasn't a full person. I was a half of a couple, right? Mm-hmm. And in this case, I feel like I'm a whole person, but in a relationship. You've got to be committed to allowing both partners to grow where they are. So many of the relationships, I think, in age gap, the older kind of stifles the growth of the younger, in the sense that that the older guy takes care of the younger guy and they don't even have a career, right? And I had dated some guys where that they wanted to be kind of a house husband and they were younger, and I was like, yeah, I don't really want any more dependence. And so I think, right? So some of these relationships are a little dysfunctional, and I think we see that in Mike. I think to have a healthy one, you have to allow both of you to grow. And particularly if you're the older one, you've got to recognize that if you want a younger guy who's got a career and not become some dependent, you've got to give the flexibility for them to have a career, right? Mm-hmm. And grow in that career. And that's probably going to mean you're going to end up in a long distance relationship at some point. So secondly, then once you do find yourself in this long distance, I think you've got to be committed to spending the money to travel. Mm-hmm. So many guys end up in these long distance relationships, but they're not committed to actually being with that person face to face and spending the money to travel. Yeah. So in our case, we travel back and forth probably 2 or 3 times a month, which isn't easy. But again, with my new business model, it gave me the freedom to be able to block out those weekends that I'm traveling.
What advice do you have for gay men who are living in a marriage and maybe afraid to come out?
Well, I think you've got to come to terms with it yourself. And I would say find a good therapist to kind of unravel a lot of your own internal feelings and struggles. You've got to find a good therapist to talk some of that through. And then at some point, you're going to have to come to terms with the fact that you're in a marriage that's a mixed orientation marriage. Mm-hmm. And I would say, have that same therapist help guide those conversations with your wife, because there's no point in living life with all these doubts and fears and really living by other people's expectations, and then find out that you're too old to actually, start life on your own. I think we wait too long. It's not that we get old too soon. It's that we start life too late, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. It does. Well, thank you for that advice. That'll be very helpful. And thank you for sharing your story today. As we already know, these stories help others who are trying to understand themselves. They feel lonely and afraid. And by hearing your story and others, they feel comforted to know that they're not, and that there's hope for the future.
Yep.
So thank you, David Nygaard. It was wonderful speaking with you today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Coming out later in life often means starting over and letting go of some old beliefs. My guest today has learned from experience how to change course and recalibrate. Whether it's a marriage, a business, a political career, or even a major heart attack, you sometimes have to pick yourself up and start again. Coming out later in life may require you to rethink your life goals and find strength you didn't realize you had. At age 60, David Nygaard is willing to do what it takes to sustain his happy, authentic life, and his resilience is a hopeful sign for the long-distance relationship he has with his younger partner. I wish them both all the best. That's it for now. I'm David Cotton. Join us next time on Out Late with David.
To hear more episodes, visit outlatewithdavid.com. And to learn more about personal life coaching services, go to davidcottoncoaching.com.